Get ready. Come on. Get ready. Hey. Get ready for Betty and Michelle, Phyllis and Stephanie. There's a new show called Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God, called it G3. Education, celebration, transparency. There's no subject they won't tackle if it uplifts you and me. Good grief, good gossip, good God, G3.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Good Grief, Good Gossip, and Good God. I am Phyllis Clark, one of your co-hosts for this show, and I want to introduce the other co-host before we get into what our content is for tonight. So there is the illustrious Miss Dr. Betty Baye. Hello.
Hey.
And the beautiful Michelle Porter.
Hey, everybody.
Wonderful. And so we're going to be talking about what our mamas said. And so Dr. Betty is going to get into a little bit more of that. But before she does, we want to acknowledge we have a co-host. She is not on here this evening. And so we just want to thank her, Miss Stephanie. We know you're somewhere watching. But, you know, we just finished up with a beautiful weekend, wrapped up Mother's Day, and we just want to talk a little bit about what our mothers have meant to us, what our surrogate mothers mean, how all of the people in our lives operate as other mothers and so forth. So let's get into a little bit more of this. So Dr. Betty, bring us on in with how this came to be and what you're thinking about with regard to what Mama said.
Well, I was really inspired by the Bible study that we had this week, and it is called "Watch Your Mouth," Mama said. And we all know that our mothers, you have probably heard this throughout your life, watch your mouth. And Mother's Day is always, it's sort of melancholy for me because I lost my mom. And I just adored her. And I always think, and I always say, God bless the child that has a wise mother, a wise and godly mother. My mother was so wise, and she just laid so much truth on me and stuff. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, that's enough. Because, I think I'm grown and I want to do this my way. And I used to hate for her to be right. You know what I'm saying? I say, how'd she know that? So, but I think about the things that my mother said. And so, and this Bible study about really how the mouth is so lethal, that one little instrument, and what it takes to you, and how often our mothers try to admonish us, and we don't always listen. Girl, you better watch your mouth. And it's not just when you're talking to them, but when you're talking to the elders or whatever. And I hear a lot of people say that we moved away from some of that respect. I remember we'd be out, in the projects, making noise and, doing what we do. And somebody's mother walked by, everybody go,
Right.
They went by. So it was a level of respect. And I always think about mothers because I don't have biological children, but I always think that all of you who did and do, I think you all are heroes, because I just look at the movies and I am just like, I have seen the film of having a baby, and I am like, oh my God. So I want to ask you all a question. You two are mothers. I want to ask you about just that process. And Michelle, let's start with, you're a nurse. And I think that sometimes when we see pregnant women, we may really take for granted, that whole process of life and birth. But Phyllis, talk a little bit from the medical perspective. What is happening to a woman when she's having a baby?
I'll go first, Phyllis.
Yeah. Did I say Phyllis? I meant to say Michelle. Yeah.
Look. It's kind of like that. You already tapped into the mom. It's like when you have multiple kids. You get called every other child's name in the house. You know your name. You know who they talking to.
Yeah.
You just
do it.
From the nursing perspective, I would say, you going through the whole birth canal and birthing baby. And we were just talking about this before we came on air. Phyllis, actually, had a vaginal delivery, whereas I had a C-section. So mine was a little different than everybody, but it's still a whole process of, you've carried this child, this human being, for 9 months. They've grown inside of you from conception to a full-size baby. Unless you're in a situation where it's a preemie, unfortunately, you have to go through that. But where you are birthing a child, basically, and with the C-sections, they're having to literally do, surgery. Now it's below your bikini line and taking the baby that way, or as Phyllis, where you're having to birth the baby in several mothers vaginally. So basically, you're just going through a process of birthing a baby, and to go through that, it's so many different emotions. As you know, you have people that deal with postpartum afterwards because your hormones are all out of whack after going through that, Phyllis. I know you understand what I'm talking about as well. But just that whole, it's hard to explain that whole process, just them growing inside of you. I always tell my sons, you really never know the true love until you've gone through birthing a child. It's just on a whole different level. And I don't want to say you've never really known true love, because that's probably not but I guess from a mother's love, it's different. Yeah. Let me say love is different than other loves. Let me clarify that. But for me, just that process of birthing them and then breastfeeding and nurturing and bonding afterwards, it's just hard to even put into words how that is. And then also it helps you to have, for me, a whole different respect for your own mother when you've gone through it yourself. And when they say, be careful what you do, because you're going to get it back in your child. Because I'll tell my kids, when they go through that puberty stage, I'm like, I love you, but I don't like you right now. So I see, you get it back what you give it to your mother at a younger age. But for me, it's just from the nursing perspective, I can go so many different directions. There's complications, but just the overall joy of knowing that you were able to grow another human being inside of your body, take care of them, nurture them, and then bring them into this world. It's just a feeling like no other. And then you just want to protect them. As you all know, our world is just really crazy right now. It's just so much stuff going on in our city, in our world as a whole. And you just want to continue to protect them. Even with my 22-year-old, I'm just a nervous wreck when he's just out doing stuff, because you just want them to come home safely, because there's so much stuff that's happening in our world. So I know I probably went all around John's barn and answered your question, but it's just a nurturing feeling for me. It's just a love, like, it's hard to explain the type of love that you have from a mother, just being able to say, I birthed that human being. Phyllis, I'll let you.
Girl. Phyllis
did on about that.
Yeah, Phyllis did a push. And what fascinates me is those shoulders. I try to figure out, how do those shoulders? And some of those little babies look like little football players and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. Phyllis, talk about, you did it that way. You did it
that way. Okay. So I just have to tell you, so my first daughter, she's 18 now, getting ready to go to college in a few months, and I can't even believe it. It feels like it was just last night all that happened. But she was not a preemie, but she was small. So I didn't have to worry about the shoulders. And so she just came right on out like she was supposed to do. And my husband was there as one of the persons to catch her. So it was really, really interesting, all the stories they told me, because I just don't remember all of that. My second daughter was, so the first daughter was almost 5 pounds, and my second daughter, she will be 14 Friday. And of course, I'm thinking about all the way back to day one, right? And but she was about 7 pounds. And what is interesting is that I had to have help. So I pushed, but I had some help. And it's so funny because that help that I received all those years ago, it still impacts my body today. And I say, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to do what I have to do just to stretch and, talk to my doctor about what I need to do for lower back issues and things like that. So, and I understood that going into it. I realized it, but it was just a decision that I wanted to make. But being a mother, I'll just tell you, about 2 hours ago, my youngest daughter was standing at the table. She was doing something for herself, writing a note. And then I just was like, I was right there by her. Then I just started just feeling on her arm and touching her skin and just pinching her in little ways and looking at her pants and doing, and then she's like, she's doing some stuff like that. And then I remembered in about 3 seconds, I remember, oh my God, my mom used to do me like that. This is what I used to do to my mom. But she's put all over my ears and my, like, Mom, stop. Ugh, get that. And I'm like, oh my God, Sydney, I'm doing what grandmother did to me. And I love all of it. I just want to touch you. You my baby. And, you came from me, and I just want to look at you and stare at you when you're sleeping. But yeah, this is a whole different kind of spiritual connection. Throughout the Mother's Day weekend, I was just looking at old pictures, looking at their birth and their first few days of life, and talking about stuff from 10 years ago. But yeah, and then I also, you're going to get into this, but I'm going to say I'm thinking also about, my mother and my own personal experiences. And so I can't wait to share some of that, but I want to wait until you ask those questions. So I'll there.
I remember that my mother would often say, particularly when I thought that I was grown, she would say, you came out of me. I know you better than you know yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was usually when I thought, I was just being grown and losing my mother. And it's been 25 years, 26 years. But to this day, I still try to please my mother. I know when I'm doing things that my mother would not be pleased about, I could literally feel her saying, now, you know better. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I miss her. And I remember saying to my uncle, who my father's brother, who his mother died, he was very young and he barely remembers her. And I said, Uncle Lonnie, I sure miss my mother. And he said, me too. I miss my mother. And he never got to really know her. You know what I'm saying? So it's very interesting. He never really had her in his life, but he still missed his mother. And I just thought that was so interesting. But I wanted to ask each of you, because I wrote a column years ago about Mama Said, and I collected all the Mama sayings from different friends. What are some of the things, Michelle, that you can remember your mother saying, and that maybe even when she said, you were like, oh Lord, if she said this again, I'm going to shoot myself. But what are some of the things that your mama said to you?
Oh God, Miss Betty, you're right. There are so many, but that one that I remember, because when you said that I brought you into this world, that used to be the one. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. And I do that with my kids. Like when they lose their mind, I have to remind them, don't forget your mama's crazy and I will jack you up. Like I brought you in this world and I will take you out. Don't mess with me. That one. And she was always big on first impressions are your last impressions. So when you be early, my mom is one of those, she's going to be 30 minutes early, whereas I'm probably pulling in on 2 wheels to make sure I'm on time. But be early is to be on time. And your first impressions, just make sure you come. You don't come. I don't care if it's an interview for, and not to slight McDonald's, but even a McDonald's interview, come dressed to the nines, because your first impressions are your last impressions. So you always want to come with your best, present with your best, because that's what people are going to always remember about you. So those are some of the things that I remember. Just, I'll bring you in this world. I'll take you out. First impressions are everything. And also, as long as you put God first, it'll always work out. We're very spiritual. So it's always pray about it. You're going to be okay. When I'm stressing about it, did you pray about it? If you put God first, he's got you. Those are the first 3 things that I think of when I think about my mama said statements.
Yes, Phyllis. What did your mama say to you?
The one big thing that carries me every single day is, this, I think I was about 4 years old or 5 years old, and I was learning to pray. And at some point, right around that time frame, my mom she told me that I was a temple. And I was like, what's a temple? And, she was slick with it too. So she taught me what it was and said, God lives in here, in you. You are a temple. And the reason I say she was slick with it is because that became my nickname. And so she calls me Temple to this day, and I'm 51. And so her email, even in her emails to me, she'll say, hey, Temp, she's cut it off a little bit, but it has made me think more about who I am and whose I am in every situation, interaction, or circumstance. Because sometimes I want to get petty, and I don't, because I'm a temple, right? And I just stop and I just think about the way I walk in the world and the way that I want to teach my own daughters that they are temples too.
Yeah,
What we eat, what we do, how we think, all of that stuff.
that's
So
true.
that's one big one.
Michelle?
Phyllis, you really hit on something when you said about the pettiness, because I tease my best friend all the time that God's still working on my pettiness, and I have to remember that my kids are watching, so I want them to do the right thing. So you're not the only one, because I struggle with that, because you want to respond. Some people make you want to respond a certain way. You're like, no, I got to remember. I'm trying to give them a certain impression. Well, ladies, we are going to go to break, and then we're going to come back and talk about some more examples of what Mama said and how we are leading our children and celebrate, mothers that are in heaven watching over us, some of those that stood in the gap. So please stay tuned and stay with us. We'll be right back.
Some people refuse to do this to a good Funyun, but if you take a Funyun and put a damp paper towel on it and put it in the microwave for just a little bit to sogify.
That's an official word now. He just made that up.
To sogify your Funyun. Well, hello everybody. My name is Ken Jobst and I am here with my wife,
Elisa Lee.
And I've got to tell you what, I'm so excited to have you back to Taste and See on SSCliveTV. I've had some of the best pickled stuff ever in the history of food. Pickled cucumbers, right?
Which are just usually regular pickles.
Hello, everyone. We are back for our great show. I know most of us celebrated Mother's Day last weekend, and it was a beautiful day. And again, we want to say happy belated Mother's Day to all of our beautiful mothers, all of those that stand in the gap as mothers, the grandmothers. And I just want to send a special happy heavenly Mother's Day to all of our mothers who are in heaven, watching over all of their children and grandchildren here on earth. We are here talking about what Mama said and what are the things that we remember as a child and what we've gone through to birth our own children. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the beautiful Miss Betty Baye, so she can tell us some of the things that her beautiful mother used to share with her.
Oh, child, my mother had so many. But one of her things, she would always say, God don't like ugly, and he don't care nothing about pretty.
I love it.
Other words, and she would say stuff like ugly is as ugly does, pretty is as pretty does, to let us understand that the cuteness on the outside, you know what I'm saying, is not nothing to do with the cuteness on the inside. And that when you act ugly, I don't care what you look like, you look ugly. And I could just hear her saying it now. And God don't like ugly. And then she would say to me, she said, the one thing, she said, the thing that you have to be careful of, she said, there are 3 things that you don't want to be. She told my sisters and I, she said, and that's a liar, a thief, and a jealous person. Because she said, jealousy you will hurt somebody, you will get hurt, and a thief. So we had this thing. I know that one of my girlfriends in her house, everybody had locks on their bedroom doors in the house, because you couldn't have anything in there because they were like all thieves. You couldn't put a soda in the refrigerator. They had their own little refrigerators and stuff because, you know what I'm saying? They just would, they just had that thievery in them, And so I always think about that when people talk about envy and stuff like that. My mother raised me not to envy. She said, you don't know how people got what they got, and you don't know what they have to do to keep it. So you need to, you don't need to be envying other people. So I got so many, just good lessons for her, and ones that I still feast on today. I cannot tell you how many situations I am in. And I said, oh, I wish I could dig Mama up and say, Mama, you told me, because we don't want them to know everything, And when we think we grown, you know how they just give you that eye, and that eye is like, And my mother, another thing she would say is keep living. Just keep living, because you know everything. Keep living. And I lied to my mother one time, and it was a bad lie. And the lady that told my mother that I was a liar was somebody that didn't care for my mother. And I still tried to lie. And when my mother found out that woman was telling the truth, that I was a liar, my mother cried. And the way she would get me is she didn't talk to me for like 2 or 3 days. She wouldn't even like look at me because I put her in that position that she was defending me and I was a liar. And she'd say, there's nothing too bad to tell mama, nothing. I'm going to get upset about it, but there's nothing too bad to tell your mama. And how did you let me get out there with that woman that you know does not care for me and make me look bad? So she didn't talk to me. That was her thing. She'd give you the silent treatment. And I would keep trying to, get her attention, mommy. And she would just look at me like, girl, if you don't, no words, just put my plate on the table, like eat, But my mother would give me the silent treatment and would kill me. So, that was just the way my mom was. But I used to say, is there a mother university? Because I don't care what part of the country you live in. I don't care whether you poor, middle class, upper class, or whatever. Do you know that mothers say the same thing? Now, where does this come from? Is there a school? Y'all are mothers. Do y'all go to school? What happens?
I don't know. That's a great question because I swear it seems like, we do all say the same thing. One of those, what's the one when they're in trouble? I'll slap the taste out of your mouth. I've heard.
I've heard teachers off your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard a little bit of everything, but yeah, it's funny because yes, a lot of my friends that are parents or mothers, we all say the same thing, and it's funny. So I really don't have an answer to that question. What do you think, Phil? It's funny that we all do say the same stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking about some scenes of the Cosby Show, where mom, she's getting the kids right, and a lot of it is cultural, I think. We've grown up looking at our aunties and our grandmothers and, Miss Dorothy across the street with your best friend and all of these things. But it's interesting. I think as we kind of go along, no, there's no book for it, but we have sense and we have experiences and we're co-creating all of this at the same time. And even when our decisions aren't right, they are still things that we've had to move on, and I believe that we learn from. I'll never forget when I made a decision for one of my daughters, and I shouldn't have. It should have been her decision, and so she really didn't learn the way I wanted her to because I done went off and did it for her, and it's and so now we're having to retrace all of that. But this time I learned better, like Maya says, and so I did better. And when that situation came in front of her again, guess what she did? Made her own decision. So we're talking about how to make decisions and not me making these decisions for her. But can I give another one? Can I give another one? Mom said, okay. This made me think. I think I was about in my 20s when my mom started telling me this. I got married at 23. And she was like, everything is figure outable. She loves to make up words and stuff. She was the coolest, but everything.
I might borrow that one.
So when you feel like, I just can't get this, or this is just not working, well, okay, sit with it for a minute and think about different things as it relates to the situation and figure it out. Use what you know. And whatever you have to garner from someone else to make a decision or to get some information, again, it's figure outable. And this was pre-Google, okay? This was pre a lot of the things that we have now. Yeah. And then one more real quick. I'll never forget, she says this, I think she said this yesterday. But you have free will. So I'm like, oh, Mom, look, help me out with this. I'm thinking about this and so-and-so is doing this. It's up to you. I'm like, no, I want to answer from you. And she's like, but you have free will. It's up to you to figure out what to do and how you're going to do it. And then if you make a mistake, figure that out too. It can bounce back from that. I have one more, but I want to stop. Michelle, what you got?
One thing I will say, I loved when I was growing up, it was okay and I think that's some of the things that we've gotten away from in our community today. It was okay for the whole neighborhood to look out for you. So it was for the neighbor to, if you were outside doing something that you didn't have any business doing, your neighbor or your aunt or whoever it was would correct you. And you not only were you corrected by them, but you were corrected again by your parents once you got home.
Yeah.
And I missed that, that it was okay for your village to help raise, our children. So that's another thing that I do remember growing up, that everybody raised you, and it was okay. If you were at church, you were running around the church when you weren't supposed to be doing something. It was nothing for, one of the grandmothers in the church, hey, and they just gave you that look like you all were talking about. And you knew, hey, I better straighten it up, or, you were going to hear about it again from your mother. So I miss that too. I think we need more of that with our youth today, and the ones that we're losing, that we need to just all jump in to help raise our youth, because we're losing so many of them. And I think for me too, my kids know I'm not your friend. I'm your parent.
Come on.
Yes, my mother would say,
There's a difference between, and my mom would tell me that I'm not trying to be your friend. I'm your parent. And there's a difference between being a parent and being someone's friend. We brought them into this world, so we need to raise them, nurture them. And as Phyllis said, help them to make those decisions. Don't make those decisions for me, because I've done it where I wanted, to protect them and make sure it went or the way I thought it should have gone. So I kind of made the decision for them, but they didn't learn anything from me doing it for them, as Phyllis mentioned. So we need to help them, to nurture them, help them to grow and be the successful people that we want them to be in the world today.
Well, you all made good points. And I think the important point is to talk about the village. And the fact of the matter is, my mother had help. My godmother was wonderful, and all of that. But, as we have talked, I realize that we know people, or we hear about people, they don't have those kind of mothers. And I always think that sometimes we want to give mothers supernatural powers, and some mothers can't give to their children what they never had. And that as you get older and you mature, you can appreciate some of their decisions, that they made. But I recognize that I've been blessed to have that kind of mother. I have had some very interesting conversations with women, years later. One of my friends, and I thought it was the saddest thing, she said, I love to hear you talk about you and your mother. She said, do you know, my mother never told me one useful thing in my life. She said, like, I knew she loved me, but I never felt, there was never any warmth. Another friend of mine told me she never understood why her mother never knew when her birthday was, why her mother never celebrated her birthday. And it turned out that the woman, her mother, didn't celebrate her birthday because she was her father's love child. And her father brought her home and gave her to that woman. And she raised her, but she never was warm, because that was the fruit of her husband's affair. It's like Fences, in the August Wilson play. He just brought her home, and she never understood why her mother never remembered her birthday. So you see, there are like all kinds of different kinds of mothers. And I think that's where people like me come in. I'm a part of the village, that I can support other women that do have children. And maybe, there are things for us to do. So I think that God has a place for all of us. But you all just made me think, or reminded me of how blessed I am and how blessed we are, because everybody is not so blessed. And I think about children whose mothers die when they're young, or children who are put up for adoption, or, children who just have that curiosity, like what was she like? Why did she give me away? What was she thinking? Did she not love me? So it's just a lot to it. But I think that those of you who are mothers, and those of us who feel motherly, I think that we all have a responsibility, like Michelle said, in the village. And all of those things that our mothers passed on to us, that we can maybe pass on to another young mother that may not have that support system, that may not have somebody to tell her something that makes sense, even as simple of, they have a commercial now about holding the baby, and the woman has the baby, and she has the baby, and she's holding it, and she's calling her mother on Zoom, and her mother takes a pillow and shows her what to do, and the baby stops crying, and she says, oh, you know what I'm saying? So you do realize that there are ways to be a mother and not be a mother. And at some point, your children are going to be grown, and there's going to be some other child that may need what you gave them.
That's very true. And to piggyback, and before we go into your good God and wrap up for this show, I just want to piggyback on what you were saying about I'm a single mom, so I understand people like you, Miss Betty, and I'm sure Phyllis has those people that have helped her and her husband in raising their children as well. We all need our village to help us to raise these children, these young adults in today's world. That's been vital to me as far as raising my kids, me raising them. You know, as a single parent, we all need help, and I also want to just encourage, you know, single parents or even married couples that are struggling. Like Phyllis said, it's all something that we can figure out. So don't ever feel like, when you feel like it's too hard, pray about it, give it to God, and just know He's gonna help you figure out a way to raise these babies so everything's gonna be all right in the end.
And God, don't abuse that baby. You know, when you're angry and, you know, throw him around. We had the case of the little 10-year-old boy whose mother tried to cut his tongue out, and then she killed him and put him in the trunk. And I think that woman was overwhelmed. Something happened. Something snapped. And so too many of us, when we are angry, I love that it's all figurable, Phyllis, as you say. To take a breath and think before we correct our children too, so we don't, you know, hurt them in the process of trying to love them. Well, my good gossip is Proverbs 22. I got to put my glasses on, see, because I'm vain, but I put my glasses on. 22:6. It says, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. And then Proverbs 31:28 said, her children will rise up and call her blessed. And that's what we are doing. We are rising up and calling our mothers blessed. And in the process, hoping to send blessings to other people's mothers, and to know that we need to remember that every day is Mother's Day. Every day is Mother's Day. When your mother is gone, if she gave you some of those good grief, good God, good gossip lessons, she will stay with you forever. So I really do love it. I thank my co-host, Michelle Porter. Tell us how we can reach you, baby.
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, as well as Twitter at Michelle Porter. I also have my event planning company, M3 Events by Michelle, on Facebook, Instagram, as well. My website is www.m3events.org. Phyllis, where can they find you?
Yes, so my website is phyllisclarkconsulting.com. You can also find me on my business page on Facebook under the same name. And I'm also on Instagram, so under I am Phyllis Clark. So it's been a pleasure.
And you can find me on Facebook, Betty Winston Baye, and bettybaye.com. And like I say every week, I may or may not see it, but you can find me on Facebook. And I think I tweet or something every now and then, but just look up Betty Baye. There can't be that many of us in the world. So we really want to thank you. Phyllis, Michelle, are you taking us out? Because, you know, I'm so excited about this topic.
Well, we would like to thank everyone for tuning in with us this week as we talked about what Mama said and some of the great memories we have with all of our mothers. Again, I want to wish a happy belated Mother's Day to all of our mothers, and thank you all for tuning in. Please join us again next week for another great episode of Good Grief, Good Gossip, and Good God. Have a good evening.
We see you.